Hi, I'm Greg West, and I'm a principal pre-sales engineer at Cambridge Semantics. And I've been working at Cambridge Semantics for almost 8 years. And we've really, worked with a diverse array of customers across such verticals as life sciences, healthcare, financial services, government, and manufacturing. And even though obviously those are, as I said, a diverse array of customers, there are very common themes and questions that we see our customers asking. And you can read those questions below. We're going to talk, briefly today about those questions and some of the responses that our team would have. Yeah, this is a very common question. We get asked all the time, can we connect to product, XYZ? And product XYZ could be what I would think of as an upstream system, such as an Oracle, a Teradata, a Snowflake. It can also be a downstream system, such as a Tableau, a BI, another BI tool that is actually going to be consuming data from Anzo. The short answer is yes. So Anzo has out-of-the-box connectors to connect and ingest data from really just a multitude of sources. It could be unstructured data, think text files or PDFs. It could be structured or semi-structured files. Think CSV, XMLs, JSONs. I as a pre-sales engineer are working with data extracts from structured and unstructured files all the time. It can also be data from a relational source. Think your sort of traditional relational databases, as well as really any data source that provides a JDBC driver through our partnership with CData. There's over 100 different sources that are available through that drivers option. You can also create direct queries to API sources. And in the case of sort of more closed systems, we can create semantic services that can directly ingest information from that source. So that sort of covers the upstream systems that Anzo can consume data from, but Anzo also has a lot of avenues to push data to downstream consumers. So think, your sort of traditional BI tools such as Power BI or Tableau, but it could additionally be, data science tools or a relational database. So those APIs that allow for downstream access include, you can create ODBC, JDBC, OData endpoints within Anzo, as well as, there's a library called PyAnzo that allows you to push data directly into Jupyter notebooks. Yeah, this is another question we get asked quite frequently is, will I be replacing my ETL tool? Will I be replacing my data catalog? The short answer to this question is actually no. Those are very complementary tools to the Anzo platform. And let's just start by talking about your sort of traditional ETL tools. They're great. ETL tools are great, and what they're really incredibly useful for is those data transformation steps needed to pull data from your operational data sources and place them into your data warehouses. Anzo is not going to be replacing that step that you're using your ETL tools for. This is the second part of that question, right? Which was your sort of traditional data catalog. So Anzo does contain its own metadata catalog, but it's really what I would think of as complementary to a standard data catalogs. And data catalogs, your Calibras, your Relations, they contain a wealth of metadata that can be used to link and harmonize data in a knowledge graph. And Anzo will often treat that information actually as another source of data that we will use to actually connect entities up into that knowledge graph. Yeah, so another question that sort of comes up quite frequently are, is Anzo moving data? Is this data virtualization? There's different flavors that this question's being asked at, but the sort of fact of the matter is that Anzo has sort of this hybrid approach where there's 3 routes for ingesting data from a data source. And I'll talk about the first route, and then I'll sort of cover the subsequent routes. The first route, which is sort of the most common route, is that we leverage Spark pipelines to sort of move data from traditional relational sources and convert it into RDF and store that as compressed RDF within your data lake. So data is not really being moved, and sort of as needed, we will accelerate that into our in-memory graph database to create the knowledge graph. There are two other routes. There's a second route where we will actually accelerate sort of on demand using our horizontally scalable backend graph database using what we call the GDI to bring data into memory sort of on demand. The main difference between that and the first option is really when you're sort of taxing your sources of data. One is sort of you can orchestrate it to run at intervals. The second case, you're going to sort of activate and hit that source system when the user requests it. And there's a third option, which you can actually create sort of direct virtualized connections into the data source. And really what the best avenue is will vary based on the, sort of the source of the data. If you have something like an API where the data is changing quite frequently, it might make sense to use a virtualized connection versus historical data where you might use the Spark-based approach. So, another question comes up quite frequently is, I see these elaborate models being generated in the Anzo platform. How do I create these models? Is there tooling that helps accelerate their development? And the answer is yes. So the short answer is that Anzo actually can generate models directly from data sources using metadata that is available from that source. So for example, if you're generating a model from a database, it will use the foreign key connections to sort of link the entities that it creates in the model that is generated. You can then, edit that model using the Anzo tooling. That's, you don't have to know anything about OWL to generate a model. You can even, extend that model, add classes, add properties as needed. The other option is, I call the BYOM approach, bring your own model. You can, if you already have a model that you've generated, you can import that directly into the Anzo modeling editor. And in that approach, right, when you're bringing in data sources, you will have to create sort of virtualized mappings and data layers that transform your source data into that model. Yep. So this customers are often asking. I think they're a little bit worried. Sort of Sparkle and RDF is not necessarily the most widely distributed skill in every interface. There are customers that have lots of people that are sort of deeply knowledgeable about graph and semantics, but there are others that are less so. And to some extent, this necessity to know sort of important concepts about graphs and semantics will really vary based on the role of the users. So for example, your analysts that are sort of consuming data in using their BI tools, their workflow may not be affected because they will continue to use those BI tools, and just how that data is being pushed to them is going to be accelerated because they use Anzo. Now, for some of your more in-depth users of the Anzo ecosystem, think some of your data architects and engineers that might be building models and might be linking and harmonizing data. There are a couple of skills that could be useful. The first one is sort of that data modeling skill. There's a lot of overlap with traditional data modeling tools, like Irwin diagrams. If you have that sort of knowledge, it will translate very well to Anzo. And as I said before, Anzo has a lot of tooling to help accelerate the generation of those models. The second skill that I would think of as kind of important is querying, being able to write Sparkle queries to help harmonize and transform data. Again, there's a lot of overlap between Sparkle and SQL. If you're sort of an in-depth SQL user, it will come somewhat naturally to you to write Sparkle queries. But again, the Anzo platform contains a lot of features that will help accelerate your learning and development. And you may not actually have to write Sparkle queries because Anzo will directly suggest connections for you. You can create different visualizations and tables without having to write queries. Those queries will be directly generated for you. But you may find that so in some advanced use cases, you will want to know and understand how Sparkle works. And that's what the team here at Cambridge Semantics is, an expert and can consult with you on. So obviously this has been kind of a short video. We've sort of highlighted a few high-level topics. If you're sort of interested, right, you can always visit our website, or you could contact us, and we'd be more than happy to have a meeting with your organization. We have some of the foremost experts in graph and semantics in the industry. Many of us have over a decade of experience in these topics. I, for myself, have been at Cambridge Semantics for just over 8 years. So we'd love to have a conversation with you.